Hi everyone. Before we get into this audiobook, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button and drop a like. It helps me out a lot, as well as contributes a lot to the channel. Now, let's get into the story. I hope you enjoy the flagstones of the execution platform bit into Bryn's soles. Each gust tormented her threadbare tunic, a stark reminder of her exposed state before the assembled pack. High above, the swollen, carmine moon stretched warped shadows, turning familiar faces into ghoulish effigies. A day like this had always loomed, the chilling premonition a constant presence, yet anticipation proved a paltry shield against reality's brutal edge. The indictment had arrived with ruthless swiftness, venom in the Alpha's heir's cup. Circumstantial threads wove a damning tapestry. Her lore of herbs, once a point of pride and a boon to her fellows, had been twisted into a lethal weapon. Raw fear constricted her throat. Her gaze darted across the crowd, seeking solace, a flicker of doubt, anything to anchor herself to. But she met only eyes brimming with judgment, apprehension, a ravenous desire for vengeance. Even Mara, her mentor in the healing arts, averted her gaze, a mask of grief and something else, an unsettling hint of complicity. The high priestess, her countenance implacable, raised her hands, stilling the restless murmur. Bryn of the Willow Creek Pack, you stand condemned for poisoning the Alpha's son, a crime meriting death. Do you offer any final words? Bryn's thoughts spiraled, a caged bird frantic for escape. Pleas, denials, formed on her lips, but felt flimsy against the enormity of the charge. She glanced toward the Alpha's keep, a granite sentinel overlooking the square. He was absent. A wave of desolation broke over her. He had already passed sentence, deemed her unworthy of his presence, his consideration. Swallowing hard, she met the high priestess's gaze. I am innocent, she managed, her voice a mere breath, lost to the wind. I would never intentionally cause harm. The high priestess's rigid expression remained unchanged. The evidence speaks adequately. Prepare yourself. 2 sentinels, their faces grim, advanced, their grip bruising as they forced her down. The executioner, an imposing silhouette cloaked in shadow, drew closer, the axe blade reflecting the moon's bloody light. Bryn squeezed her eyes shut, a solitary tear tracing a path down her cheek. This was it. The abrupt, unjust finale. She recalled her late mother, who'd fostered her curiosity, her love for the forest. She pictured the vibrant patch of green she'd coaxed behind her hut, a defiance of color against a world drained of it. She thought of Jackson. A strange serenity descended as she yielded. Perhaps oblivion offered solace, an escape from the suspicion that had become her shadow. She fixed her gaze on the moon, its crimson wash imbuing the world with an unsettling beauty. The executioner hoisted the axe. The crowd stilled. Bryn braced, awaiting the void. Then, a voice, a primal eruption, ripped through the night. Halt. Head swiveled. Bryn's eyes snapped open. Jackson. He occupied the square's edge, his wolf form partially emerged. Eyes ignited with an intensity unknown to her. His chest rose and fell sharply, muscles bunched and ready. He was unleashed power. She is mine, he resonated, the declaration throbbing. Bryn is my mate. A collective intake of breath echoed through the assembly. Hesitantly, the executioner lowered his axe. The high priestess wore a mask of bewilderment. Jackson cleaved through the crowd, his focus locked on Bryn. Each step measured, each movement exuding dominance. He knelt before her, his hand tenderly cradling her face. His touch radiated heat against the frigid stone. "Bryn," he murmured, his tone softer, yet underscored with command. "Look at me." She obeyed, their eyes meeting. Affection was absent, replaced with a fierce, possessive resolve. He was laying claim, not offering salvation. "Do you deny our bond?" he pressed, his voice a near whisper. To deny him? Deny the Alpha? The repercussions defied comprehension. To publicly defy him spelled a death sentence, perhaps something more sinister. But to accept to be bound, to become his property, filled her with a novel dread. Her mouth opened, but words failed. She scanned the crowd, their faces a study in bewilderment and outrage. She studied Jackson, his unwavering gaze, the palpable force that radiated from him. A chilling realization settled within her. Denial was not an option. "No," she conceded, the word a fragile offering, a capitulation. "I do not deny it." Jackson's expression remained impassive. He rose, drawing Bryn with him, his arm circling her waist possessively. He addressed the crowd, his gaze sweeping them, daring a challenge. "She is under my protection," he proclaimed, authority ringing in his voice. "Any harm inflicted upon her will be considered an act of aggression against me. So I decree." The crowd stood mute, stunned into compliance. After a pregnant pause, the high priestess bowed her head. "So it is." Jackson guided Bryn away from the execution block, far from the judging eyes of the pack, toward the Alpha's manor. She stumbled alongside, her mind reeling. She was alive, but at what cost? She'd narrowly avoided one death sentence only to be chained to another, potentially more terrifying. As they walked, she felt his gaze, a heavy, assessing presence. Fearful of what she might find, she avoided his eyes. She understood nothing about him, his reasons, or expectations. She had become a pawn, an instrument for his purposes. They arrived at the manor, its stone facade looming against the bruised crimson of the sky. Jackson led her inside, through the expansive entrance hall, past the silent scrutiny of the pack servants. He spoke nothing, offered no comfort. Instead, he led her to a vast, opulent chamber, undeniably his. Finally releasing her, he turned to face her. His eyes were dark pools, unreadable. "You belong to me now, Bryn," he declared, his voice low and laced with danger. "You will obey me. You will do as you're told. Do you comprehend?" Meeting his unwavering gaze, she realized the absence of choice. Her life, her future, rested solely in his hands. Swallowing, she forced herself to meet his gaze. "Yes," she whispered, "I comprehend." A flicker of something satisfaction crossed his eyes. "Good." He paused, his gaze lingering on her face. "Now, tell me the truth. Did you poison my son?" The question hung, heavy and suffocating. Bryn's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. He'd saved her from the executioner's axe, but had not declared her innocent. He still suspected her, still entertained the possibility of her guilt. Her eyes pleaded. "I swear to you, Jackson, I did not. I would never commit such an act." He studied her face, his expression impenetrable. She couldn't discern his belief, his trust. Silence stretched, thick with tension. At last, he spoke. "I'm uncertain what to believe," he conceded, his voice raw. "But I will unearth the truth, and should you be deceiving me, Bryn, you will suffer the consequences." He turned and exited, leaving her alone within the luxurious chamber. A prisoner, ensnared in a gilded prison. She crumpled to the floor, trembling, her mind swimming with dread and uncertainty. She was bound to him now, by a connection she couldn't comprehend, a connection that might destroy them. Destined for death, the Alpha claimed her instead. A fate, she now realized, far more harrowing. The Alpha's gambit the journey from the executioner's block to Jackson's estate passed in a disorienting haze of whispers and averted eyes. Flanked by 2 impassive guards, Bryn felt the pack's condemnation as a palpable weight pressing down on her. Each flagstone underfoot seemed to intone the same damning verdict: poisoner, traitor, pariah. Suspicion saturated the very air, clinging to her like grave clothes. She was no longer the herbalist's apprentice, but a thing defiled, a source of peril. Jackson's home offered a blatant contrast to the squalid cell she'd known. Polished wood gleamed against formidable stone, and a subtle enchantment thrummed in the air, both soothing and unsettling. Servants, their faces masks of neutrality, offered shallow bows, their movements precise as clockwork. Bryn felt like an unwelcome blemish marring a pristine tableau, a feeling she wondered if her host shared. They led her to a spacious parlor, suffused with the hearth's golden light. Before she could fully absorb the sight of the lavish tapestries and meticulously placed furnishings, Jackson entered. He moved with a panther's fluid grace, his presence dominating the room, eclipsing all else. With a curt nod, he dismissed the guards and fixed his attention on Bryn, his features an inscrutable mask. "Welcome to your new accommodations," he stated, the word hanging in the balance. Bryn remained silent, her throat constricted by a blend of trepidation and defiance. She would offer no entreaties. She would face whatever fate awaited her with unwavering resolve. He studied her for what seemed an eternity, his gaze piercing and unyielding. "You're wondering why," he finally stated, shattering the silence. "Why I claimed you as mine." Bryn's chin lifted slightly, meeting his stare. "The thought has occurred to me." He chuckled, a mirthless sound devoid of warmth. "Rest assured, it wasn't motivated by affection." He began to pace, his hands linked behind his back. "Our pack is fractured. My father's failing health has created a power struggle. Some believe I lack the years, the experience, to lead." Bryn frowned, perplexed. "How does any of this concern me?" He halted his movements, turning to face her, his eyes like glacial shards. "The timing of my brother's incident was exceptionally poor. It inflamed the dissent. Accusations were bandied about. Alliances crumbled. Some whisper that my father was deliberately weakened, poisoned, to expedite my succession." A shiver snaked down Bryn's spine. "And you suspect my involvement?" "I know of your involvement," he declared, his voice steely. "However, your motivations are less clear. Were you in someone's employ, subjected to coercion, or did you act alone?" Anger surged within Bryn. "I poison no one. I swear it." Dismissing her denial, his gaze remained fixed on some distant point beyond her. "Regardless, the damage is complete, the pack is at odds, my authority is questioned. I required a dramatic gesture, something to unify them, something to remind them of the hierarchy." Bryn's stomach clenched. "And that something is me?" He nodded slowly, deliberately. "You are a convenient symbol, accused of treachery, yet spared by the Alpha's heir. It projects an image of strength, an image of control. It demonstrates my willingness to make difficult choices, to embrace risks. It showcases my dominance, and it provides a distraction from the more pressing issues at hand. Nausea threatened to overwhelm Bryn. She was a mere playing piece, a disposable tool. Her life, her liberty, were of no consequence. You exploited me. I secured my position, he corrected smoothly. And in doing so, I preserved your life, a life you were on the verge of forfeiting. Preserved? She spat, her voice laced with venom. I am your prisoner. You are under my protection, he countered, his tone laced with a dangerous undertone. And that protection carries certain expectations. You will obey my commands. You will make no attempt to flee. You will not divulge the contents of this discussion. And you will present yourself as a grateful, devoted mate. Bryn stared, her pulse throbbing in her ears. Devoted? She echoed, the word dripping with derision. Surely you don't expect me to feign. I expect you to survive, he interrupted, his voice like splintered ice. And your survival hinges on your ability to embrace the role I have assigned you. The pack is observing. They are poised to discern if this union possesses authenticity. Should they detect any weakness, any discord, they will turn against you. And against me. Bryn's mind raced, ensnared in a web of political schemes and personal animosities. Her innocence was irrelevant. Her emotions, inconsequential. She was nothing more than a pawn in Jackson's self-serving game. What if I decline? She challenged, her voice devoid of its former strength. He advanced, his eyes burning into hers. Refusal is not an option. Your life is forfeit, and I assure you, I will not hesitate to eliminate you should you become a liability. The threat hung in the air, heavy with malice. Bryn knew he was sincere. He would sacrifice her without remorse, should it further his agenda. She was nothing to him. Averting her gaze, the room seemed to constrict, the walls closing in, suffocating her. Utterly alone, she was adrift in a world that had turned hostile. Fine, she whispered, the word barely audible. I'll play your charade. A flicker of something akin to satisfaction flitted across his countenance. Good. Perhaps you will prove useful after all. He paused, then added, There will be a gathering tonight to celebrate our union. A subtle twist of distaste touched his lips as he uttered the word union. You will attend. You will smile. And you will convince those present that you are the happiest bride in the entire pack. He pivoted and strode towards the exit, leaving Bryn stranded in the lavish chamber, the oppressive weight of her gilded cage crushing her spirit. As the door clicked shut, she wrapped her arms about herself, shivering despite the comforting warmth emanating from the hearth. She was imprisoned. A captive in a political maneuver she failed to comprehend, bound to a man who regarded her as a mere implement. And the most terrifying aspect of it all was her complete lack of recourse. She sank onto a plush chair, the velvet soft against her skin, yet offering scant solace. The tapestries lining the walls seemed to mock her with scenes of blissful families and flourishing communities. She was an outsider, an anomaly, a menace to the very foundation of this society. The scent of pine and cedar wafted from the hearth, a familiar fragrance that typically brought her peace. Yet now, it served only as a stark reminder of the forest she had abandoned, the life she had forfeited. She was no longer Bryn, the herbalist's apprentice, the girl intimate with the wood's secrets. She was something else entirely, something dangerous, something claimed, and she sensed with chilling certainty that her true battle for survival had only just commenced. Whispers and shadows, Bryn was conveyed, rather than walked, through the subterranean passages of the warren. Jackson's warriors were a constricting presence, each a silent reminder of her gilded captivity. The heavy air, steeped in the aroma of damp stone and unspoken antagonism, clung to her like a damp cloth. Sunlight, filtered unevenly by the high rock ceiling, threw elongated, grotesque shapes about her ankles, mocking her progress. How readily she had once embraced the easy nods and casual banter of her pack. Now, faces averted as she passed, conversations withered before they reached her, and the very atmosphere throbbed with animosity. It was a tangible thing, this widespread rejection, a leaden weight settling in her core with each step. A boy, barely 7 summers old, ceased his play, his bright gaze filled with a fear she'd never imagined inspiring. Clutching a weathered wooden wolf toy, he retreated until his mother, her face a study in disapproval, swept him away. Bryn's breath caught in her throat. This was the true face of exile, a genuine pariah, to contaminate the very ground beneath her feet. The murmurs began delicately, like wind rustling through sere leaves. Yet they swelled, emboldened, carried on the currents to sting her ears. Venom, turncoat, Jackson's failing. Like jagged glass, the words lacerated her spirit, each syllable a fresh wound. She balled her hands into fists, striving to maintain a facade of composure, projecting the strength Jackson demanded. But inside, she was fracturing. The rhythmic thud of bodies colliding with the mats in the training yards provided a jarring counterpoint to the chaos within. Young warriors sparred, their expressions resolute, their movements honed. She saw respect in their eyes, certainly, but coupled with a wary assessment. They considered her a liability, a peril to their alpha, their tribe. Nearing the communal kitchens, the scent of roasting meat, normally a welcome fragrance, turned her stomach. A cluster of women huddled around a massive cauldron, their voices lowered, their eyes flicking in her direction. As she drew nearer, the discussion abruptly ceased, replaced by an awkward quietude. One of the women, Alara, a sturdy figure with flint-like eyes, advanced. Bryn had always liked Ilara, shared stories, gathered herbs, and sipped steaming tea together. But now, Ilara's face was a mask of implacable hardness. "Bryn," Ilara intoned, her voice flat, devoid of any warmth. "We need words." Bryn halted, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Ilara, spare me," Ilara cut in, raising a hand. "Don't insult my understanding with your prevarications. We all know your actions." "But I did nothing," Bryn protested, her voice barely a thread. "I swear I'm blameless," Ilara scoffed derisively. "Blameless? You almost ended our alpha. You betrayed every one of us." "Jackson doesn't think so," Bryn asserted, clutching at her sole remaining hope. "Jackson!" Ilara spat the name as if it were poison. "Jackson is blinded by something. But we discern you for what you truly are, a serpent within our haven." Another woman, Maya, joined her, her expression mirroring the same hostility. "We don't want you here, Bryn. You are nothing but trouble." A wave of anger surged through Bryn, a desperate impulse to defend her integrity. "This is my sanctuary," she declared, her voice gaining strength. "I be law. You relinquished that claim the moment you poisoned our alpha," Ilara intoned, her tone icy. "Depart before something regrettable befalls you." The threat hung unspoken, palpable. Bryn scanned Alara, then Maya, and the rest of the women, their faces etched with animosity. She understood then that she stood utterly alone. Jackson's protection was a fragile barrier, easily shattered by the pack's collective wrath. She pivoted and strode away, head erect, but her heart weighed down by anguish. The whispers trailed after her, louder now, more cutting. She felt their gazes boring into her back, radiating resentment. Rounding a bend, she collided with a solid form, stumbling backwards. A harsh voice snarled, "Watch your path, poisoner." Bryn lifted her gaze to meet the face of Boren, a massive warrior known for his brute force and volatile temper. He glared down at her, his eyes filled with naked antipathy. "Boren," she managed, striving to maintain her composure. "You dare utter my name," he growled, stepping menacingly closer. "You ought to be decaying in the dungeons, not wandering freely." "Jackson spared me," Bryn responded, her voice a bare murmur. "Jackson erred," Boren countered, his fist clenching. "An error I'm tempted to rectify." He towered over her, his presence menacing and dark. Bryn knew that Boren could easily overwhelm her, that no one would fault him for resolving matters. Fear wound itself around her insides, frigid and binding. "Don't," she pleaded, her voice wavering. "Please, Boren. I didn't commit the act." Boren's laugh was devoid of warmth. "Everyone knows you did it, Bryn. You're a deceiver and a traitor." He advanced closer, his breath hot upon her face. "You're fortunate Jackson desires you alive. Otherwise..." He trailed off, allowing the menacing nature of his threat to suffuse the air. He shoved her aside, sending her staggering against the rough stone. "Stay clear of me, poisoner," he spat, before stalking away. Bryn slid down the wall, her limbs drained of strength, her flesh trembling. She was encircled by foes, caught in a thicket of deceit and mistrust. Jackson's protection was a double-edged thing, preserving her life while simultaneously marking her as a point of hostility. She closed her eyes, tears coursing down her cheeks. How could she endure in this inimical place? How could she establish her innocence when all had judged her guilty? She did not know. But one thing she knew with certainty. She must seek a way. She had to wage war for her existence, for her liberty, for her very spirit, even if it demanded facing the pack's accumulated rage, even if it demanded standing defiant against Jackson himself. The shadows deepened around her, and Bryn understood that her fight had only just commenced. The murmurs would persist, the glares would endure, but she would not yield. She would unearth the truth, and she would expose the real poisoner, even if that were the culmination of all things. Trial by training the training yard stank of upturned soil and exertion. Bryn stood taut, a coppery taste of apprehension clinging to the back of her throat. Jackson, a dark silhouette against the overcast sky, stalked around her like a wolf sizing up a challenge. His irises, typically shimmering gold, had hardened to the color of granite. "You will learn to defend yourself," he declared, his tone devoid of any warmth, each syllable a shard of ice. Not a suggestion, a command. She met his flinty gaze, a flicker of rebellion igniting within. "I don't crave your protection, Jackson. I demand my freedom." A tick pulsed in his jaw. "Liberty is earned, Bryn, not freely offered." He flung a practice sword dual-edged, but still a threat at her feet. The impact echoed in the taut air. "Pick it up." Hesitation snagged at her. Her life had been a tapestry of herbs and healing, not armaments and aggression. But the challenge gleaming in Jackson's eyes sparked something resolute within. She stooped, her fingers wrapping around the cold steel. It felt alien, cumbersome, yet strangely potent. "Stance," Jackson snapped, his voice cracking like a whip. "Feet shoulder-width, weight balanced. No tells in your movement." She struggled, awkwardly mimicking his instructions, her body resisting the unfamiliar posture. Jackson observed, his face a mask. He closed the distance, his presence stifling, correcting her grip, his fingers grazing hers. An unexpected, unwanted current jolted through her. She flinched, pulling back. "Focus, Bryn," he barked. "This is not an invitation. It is a fight for your life." He launched into an attack, a swift, practiced maneuver that nearly upended her. The flat of the blade whispered past her cheek, close enough to stir the air. Raw, instinctive panic seized her. She lifted her practice sword, a feeble effort at defense. "Again," Jackson ordered, unyielding. The training ordeal stretched on, each moment an eternity. Bryn was ungainly, unpolished, perpetually retreating. Jackson's critiques were sharp, unrelenting. Yet, beneath the sting, she detected a subtle shift, a begrudging respect, a glimmer of something. As the sun began its descent, painting the heavens in shades of sunset orange and deep violet, Bryn discovered an emerging grace. The initial fear had transmuted into a singular, near-intoxicating focus. She started anticipating Jackson's advances, deflecting his strikes with developing prowess. "You're improving," Jackson allowed, his voice marginally less harsh. "But you're still predictable. Too defensive. Attack." "I'm no warrior," Bryn countered, her breath ragged. "I mend, not maim." "Everyone is a combatant when survival hangs in the balance," Jackson retorted, his stare unwavering. He surged forward anew, but this time Bryn was primed. She pivoted away from his onslaught and, in a surge of adrenaline, lunged, her sword tip connecting against his ribs. Jackson stilled, surprise registering in his eyes. He retreated, a slow curve spreading across his face. "Again," he urged, his tone tinged with something akin to admiration. They continued until darkness consumed the space, lit solely by moonglow. Bryn, spent but strangely invigorated, stood heaving, every muscle singing in protest. She had endured a trial, physical and emotional. Yet she had also stood her ground. She had revealed to Jackson, and even more so, to herself, that she possessed hidden strengths. "Enough," Jackson said at last, his voice low. "You possess potential, Bryn, more than I initially assessed." His words, however reluctant, soothed her wounds. She lowered the sword, her fingers throbbing. "Thank you," she murmured. Jackson nodded, his gaze lingering a beat too long before he turned away. "Rest. We resume tomorrow." He paused, adding almost as an afterthought, "And Brynid, this changes nothing." She watched him depart, his form fading into the night. His final words echoed, a cold reminder of her precarious position. He might recognize her fortitude, her tenacity, but he remained convinced of her culpability. The enforced connection between them endured, a gilded cage of cautious regard. Back in her Spartan chamber, Bryn collapsed onto the pallet, her body aching. She closed her eyes, replaying the training session. She had persevered, even prospered, but the true battle was far from won. She remained a prisoner, an accused, alone. Yet, as sleep tugged at her, she clung to the memory of Jackson's grudging acknowledgement. A tiny ember of hope in the surrounding blackness. She was not helpless. She was not defeated. And she would not yield. She would harness this education, this burgeoning strength, to unearth the truth and reclaim her existence. Even if it required challenging the Alpha himself, she would exonerate herself, not for Jackson, not for the pack, but for her own sake. The following days settled into a relentless cycle of discipline and solitude. Each sunrise brought the sting of Jackson's demanding instruction, each sunset the throb of exhausted limbs. Yet, with each deflection, each strike, each shield, Bryn evolved fiercer, more self-assured. The terror that had once held her captive began to lessen, replaced by a focused resolve. One afternoon, mid-spar, Jackson halted, his expression pensive. "Why haven't you attempted escape?" he inquired, his voice hushed. Bryn lowered the blade, her gaze locking with his. "Where could I flee?" she parried. "The pack believes I'm a rogue. They would hunt me relentlessly. And you would return me." Jackson's jaw tightened. "You speak the truth," he conceded, his voice barely audible. "Then what end does it serve?" Bryn questioned, a note of despair in her voice. "I am ensnared, regardless." "It serves to demonstrate," Jackson said, his eyes fixed on hers, "that you refuse to be broken. You are a fighter, a quality I initially failed to recognize." His carefully chosen words radiated a subtle warmth. It was the closest he had come to hinting at her possible innocence. A fragile seed of hope began to take root. "And what do you perceive now?" "Jackson?" she asked quietly. He hesitated, searching her expression. "I see resilience," he admitted finally. "And an inner strength that masks any outward appearance of fragility." The silence expanded, thick with unacknowledged emotions. For the first time since the accusation, Bryn sensed a genuine path forward. Perhaps she could penetrate the wall of doubt that imprisoned her. Perhaps she could sway Jackson to believe in her. But as she gazed into his eyes, she saw a different struggle, a deep-seated war between his duty to the pack and his what? His growing respect. The bond. She could not define it precisely, but she sensed its power. Training continued, though the dynamic between them had subtly shifted. Tension and suspicion remained, yet a fragile sense of understanding had begun to bud. A reluctant respect blooming in the stark landscape. Bryn comprehended that a substantial journey still lay ahead to establish her innocence, but she also recognized she was no longer entirely alone in her car. Struggle. She had Jackson, an unlikely ally, a forced mate, a man tentatively beginning to see her for who she truly was. And that, she realized, was a weapon stronger than any blade. The Alpha's wrath, the heavy air, thick with pine and the loamy breath of the earth, the lied that taught unease gripping the training grounds. Bryn, forehead slicked with sweat, let her practiced sword fall. Jackson had halted their session, his attention snagged by something beyond the trees. A rigid line defined his jaw, his neck muscles drawn tight as cables. "Insubordination," he murmured, the word a low growl barely loud enough to carry. Its ominous resonance sent a tremor through Bryn. Moments later, a young wolf, scarcely more than a boy, stumbled into view. Terror widened his eyes, his breath hitching in shallow gasps. He stank of moon petal, the cloying sweetness of the forbidden plant a temporary anesthetic for a wolf's senses. A dangerous vulnerability. Jackson's edict against its use, especially on patrol, had been absolute. Kalen, Jackson's tone was deceptively mild, a predator's honeyed lure. "Explain yourself." Kalen recoiled, his gaze flitting frantically, seeking a phantom escape route. "Alpha, I needed it. Just a touch. The patrol the woods overwhelmed me." "Overwhelmed you? Overwhelmed you?" Jackson echoed, the calm fracturing. "These woods are you, Kalen. Your responsibility, woven into your very being. You chose weakness, to jeopardize your brethren for momentary comfort?" Bryn's stomach clenched as she watched. She'd witnessed Jackson's control during training, but this was different, a chilling primal authority. I didn't intend to," Kalen stammered, cut short by a snarl that ripped through the clearing. Raw fury vibrated in the air. Silence. He shifted his gaze to Bryn, and for the briefest instants, his expression softened a fleeting flicker of something akin to regret, before the mask slammed back into place. "Bryn, bear witness to the consequences of betraying your pack." Bryn felt a jolt. This was twisted. Already accused of treachery herself, she was now forced to observe another's quote. "Ordeal?" Jackson's posture radiated dominance as he faced Kalen. "The penalty for moonpetal usage during patrol is 20 lashes. May it serve as a lesson, a visceral reminder that pack safety trumps individual whim." Kalen crumpled to his knees. "Pleading, Alpha, have mercy. I beg you, I won't repeat it. I swear." Jackson remained impassive. "The sentence stands." He nodded to two hulking wolves who moved forward, their faces grim. One carried a thick, oiled whip. Bryn yearned to look away, to shield herself, but Jackson's gaze held her captive, a silent imperative to watch. The first lash sliced through the air, a brutal crack. Kalen's cry was ragged, a sound of pure agony. Bryn winced, her own body mirroring the impact. She squeezed her eyes shut, yet the image was branded onto her eyelids, Kalen's back, already blooming with angry welts. Each strike was punctuated by a scream. Bryn's heart hammered. She'd faced death, stared down danger. But this was a different beast entirely. A cold, calculated cruelty. She risked a glance at Jackson. His countenance was a blank slate, his eyes glacial. No empathy flickered, no hint of compromise. He stood, an unyielding statue, as the lashes descended. 20th blow landed. Kalen lay motionless, robbed of consciousness. The two wolves hauled him away, leaving a crimson trail on the earth. Jackson turned, his gaze sharp enough to cut. "This is the fate of those who betray their pack," he reiterated, his voice flat, devoid of warmth. "Do you comprehend?" Bryn swallowed, her throat constricting. "Yes," she managed, her voice unsteady. She understood, though not as he intended. She understood that Jackson was not simply a strong leader. He was a ruthless one, capable of inflicting profound pain without a second thought. "Good." Jackson's gaze lingered. Then he turned and vanished into the trees. Bryn remained alone, the heavy air thick with the coppery scent of blood. Kalen's broken form was etched into her memory, a stark testament to Jackson's power and the price of defiance. Her legs gave way, and she sank to the earth. The training session, the fledgling connection she'd imagined forming, felt irrevocably tainted. She had glimpsed a chilling aspect of him, a darkness that rattled her to her core. Was this the man she was bound to? The one she was meant to trust? Doubt, a frigid tendril, snaked into her thoughts. She believed she was beginning to decipher him, to see beyond the alpha exterior, but now she realized how little she truly knew. The forest, once a refuge, now seemed malevolent, the shadows teeming with unseen perils. The air, once sweet, now carried the metallic tang of blood and the sharp reek of fear. Bryn squeezed her eyes shut, fighting to suppress the onslaught of images, sounds, and emotions. She was trapped, not only by false accusations, but by the bond that shackled her to a man she suddenly didn't recognize. He saved her only to mark her. He kept her from death, but at what price? Was survival under his dominion truly preferable? The questions churned within her, unresolved, a tempest brewing. She had to survive, had to prove her innocence, but now, more than ever, she knew she had to tread carefully. She was walking a tightrope, and one misstep could mean her annihilation. The Alpha's fury was a force of nature, and she was caught squarely in its path. Blood on the border sleep offered Bryn little solace on Pack lands, but the prior night was uniquely tormenting. Fractured visions of Kaelin's broken body, and Jackson's granite countenance played behind her closed eyelids. A restless energy, impossible to quell, dragged her from bed before sunrise. The air bit with winter's chill, laced with the fragrances of evergreens and wet earth. She drifted toward the training grounds, deserted but for the silent sentinels of straw. Her attempts at practicing the few maneuvers she knew felt faltering, uncoordinated. A figure detached itself from the wood's edge. Jackson. He observed her, arms folded, his features veiled by the pale dawn. Bryn stilled, her pulse a frantic drum against her throat. "What are you doing?" he rumbled, his tone a low register. Trying to keep busy, she mumbled, refusing eye contact. A grunt escaped him as he approached. "You're wasting energy." "That's parlor fighting." He circled her, radiating an almost palpable force. "Here," he said, grasping her wrist. "I'll show you something worthwhile." He adjusted her posture, correcting the alignment of her hand. His touch sparked an unexpected current through her, a disquieting blend of apprehension and something akin to awareness. He displayed a rapid sequence of blows, each movement lethal, impossibly graceful. "Power stems from balance," he elucidated, his tone almost conversational. "And knowing your target." Bryn attempted to mirror him, her limbs heavy and uncooperative. Annoyance welled up within her. "It's pointless," she declared, pulling away. "I'm not a fighter." "Everyone possesses the capacity for combat, Bryn," he countered, his gaze locking onto hers. "Some simply haven't discovered their arena." Before she could retort, a howl, a visceral cry of savagery, sliced through the crisp morning air. It was echoed moments later, a feral chorus that sent shards of ice down her spine. Jackson's jaw tightened. "Rogues," he spat, his voice terse. "Border skirmish." He pivoted, sprinting toward the main structure, barking orders as he ran. Bryn remained rooted, paralyzed by dread. Then adrenaline surged, hot and potent. She couldn't simply stand by. She gave chase, guided by the mounting cacophony and the metallic tang of spilled blood. The tableau that met her eyes was ferocious. Canines grappled in a chaotic vortex of fangs and claws, the atmosphere thick with the reek of gore and matted fur. Jackson moved like a force of nature, carving a path through the opposing ranks. His warriors fought with desperate valor, but the rogue contingent was larger, more vicious. Bryn recoiled as one of Jackson's defenders crumpled, his jugular torn. She had to intervene. But how? She was no soldier. Then Jackson's words echoed. "Everyone possesses the capacity for combat, some simply haven't discovered their arena." Her mind raced, cataloging the positioning of the combatants, the lay of the land, the ebb and flow of the bond. Melee. She noticed the rogues were concentrating their assault along the eastern perimeter, where the ground was treacherous and uneven. Jackson's company was being forced back, losing ground steadily. An idea ignited within her. Perilous, yet potentially effective. She weaved through the struggling wolves, ignoring their menacing growls and snapping jaws. Reaching Jackson, she seized his arm. "Jackson!" she screamed, fighting to be heard above the din. "They're fixated on the east. It's a gambit. The footing is unstable." Jackson whirled, his eyes blazing with fury. "Get back inside," he roared. "This isn't your place." "No! Listen to me," Bryn shouted, her voice trembling but resolute. "Order your warriors to retreat. Draw them further onto the broken ground. Then outflank them from the north and south. They'll be caught in a kill zone." Jackson hesitated, his gaze darting between Bryn and the fray. He perceived the verity in her words, the soundness of her strategy. A flicker of something akin to respect momentarily softened his harsh features. He bellowed a command, his voice carrying across the field. "Withdraw. Eastern flank, pull back. North and south flanks, prepare to advance." His warriors, though baffled, obeyed. They slowly disengaged, enticing the rogues further onto the hazardous terrain. Bryn watched, her heart a trapped bird, as Jackson's northern and southern wings began their maneuver. The rogues, sensing imminent triumph, redoubled their efforts, oblivious to the ambush that awaited. Then Jackson signaled. The northern and southern wings surged ahead, crashing into the rogues' flanks. The invaders, caught completely by surprise, descended into pandemonium. Their advance faltered, their formation shattered. The momentum of the conflict shifted abruptly. Bryn watched, breathless, as Jackson spearheaded the counteroffensive, his actions swift and devastating. The rogues, demoralized and outmaneuvered, began to scatter. Jackson's fighters pursued them relentlessly, driving them back over the boundary. The engagement was concluded. An oppressive quiet descended, broken only by the ragged gasps of the warriors and the lamentations of the injured. Jackson stood at the heart of the battlefield, his form stained with grime and blood, his gaze sweeping the aftermath. He spotted Bryn standing at the edge of the clearing, her countenance pale yet her eyes gleaming with an odd luminescence. He strode toward her, his expression inscrutable. Reaching her, he halted, his gaze searching hers. "You perceived it," he stated, his voice low. "You discerned the weakness, the opening." Bryn nodded mutely. "You saved us," he said, almost inaudibly. Bryn shook her head in denial. I simply saw what had to be done." Jackson scrutinized her intently, his eyes filled with a complex mixture of astonishment, respect, and a quality she couldn't quite decipher. Then he turned and departed, leaving her standing alone on the blood-soaked earth. The triumph tasted acrid, tainted by the brutality and the realization that she remained a prisoner, bound to this man and this community by a tether she hadn't chosen. But something had irrevocably changed. She had proven her worth, not as a fighter, but as something more, a tactician, a leader. And at that instant, a spark of hope ignited within her, a fragile belief that perhaps, just perhaps, she could discover a means to survive, and perhaps even flourish, in this treacherous new world. Scars and secrets the last of the marauding wolves were hauled away, their pathetic yelps lost to the gale. Jackson, a statue carved from granite, surveyed the scene of conflict, his jaw a hard, unforgiving line. Bryn's pulse slowed, the rush of combat giving way to a prickling unease. He'd been a rampart for the pack, heedless of his own safety, a vortex of fury and fangs. The consequence was etched upon him. A savage tear bisected his left arm, and a shallower graze kissed his cheek. "Allow me," she offered, approaching with measured steps. He offered no resistance, a bare dip of his head granting leave. This tacit consent signaled a profound shift, the alpha yielding something more intimate. Away from the murmuring throng of pack members, Bryn sought a secluded nook in the training grounds and beckoned him to sit. He settled onto a prone log, his movements betraying underlying tension. The metallic tang of blood hung heavy, mingling with the woodsy perfume of the forest floor. Kneeling before him, she meticulously assessed the damage. A nervous tremor ran through her hands as she reached for a water skin and a strip torn from a discarded tunic. "This might sting a bit," she murmured, her voice softer than planned. Jackson remained impassive as she cleansed the rent in his arm, his gaze fixed on some distant horizon. The silence stretched, taut with unspoken sentiments. She could feel the radiating warmth of his body, the dormant power humming beneath his skin. "Why?" she blurted, the query escaping before she could leash it. His eyes flickered down, a glint of surprise momentarily visible. "Why what? Why weren't you more careful?" She indicated the raw gash on his forearm. "You could have avoided this." A mirthless curve twisted Jackson's lips. "Perhaps, but someone else would have paid the price. An alpha protects those under his charge. Even at the cost of yourself?" He shrugged, a dismissive gesture that failed to mask the intensity in his eyes. "Sometimes necessity demands it." Bryn finished cleansing the wound, her brow furrowed as she secured the bandage. "Or is it merely expected? Is that the mantle of leadership, Jackson? Offering yourself as a sacrifice until there's nothing left to give?" His features hardened. "Leadership means doing what must be done, Bryn. Accept it. But what if what's deemed necessary is wrong?" He pinned her with a flinty stare. "Who are you to question such things?" She completed her task, her movements sharp and deliberate. "Someone who's witnessed the consequences of blind obedience. Someone who understands the sting of false accusations, of judgment without due process." The air thrummed with unspoken challenges. Jackson remained mute for a long heartbeat, his gaze unwavering. "You presume I haven't witnessed that," he finally rasped, his voice a low rumble. "You believe I haven't wrestled with the decisions forced upon me." Bryn held his gaze, spotting a flash of vulnerability amidst the hardened facade. "Have you?" He averted his eyes, his jaw ticking. "There are depths you can't fathom, Bryn. Circumstances beyond your comprehension." "Then enlighten me," she countered, her voice barely audible. He shook his head, a tick appearing at the corner of his mouth. "Not so simple." She reached out, her fingertips grazing his cheek near the shallow cut. He recoiled slightly, but didn't break contact. "It could be," she whispered, "if you allowed it." His gaze locked onto hers, a maelstrom of conflicting emotions swirling in the depths of his green eyes. She glimpsed pain, fatigue, and a nascent hope. It vanished swiftly, replaced by the familiar mask of alpha dominance. He drew back, severing the connection. "Finish your task," he commanded, his tone clipped. Bryn swallowed her disappointment and complied, tending to the laceration on his face. As she worked, she noticed a faint, pale line hidden beneath his hairline, disappearing into the thick tangle of his dark hair. She'd never noticed it before. "What's this from?" she inquired, her fingers tracing the faint scar. He stiffened. his muscles coiling beneath her touch. "None of your concern." "It is if you intend to continue throwing yourself into harm's way," she retorted, but her voice lacked bite. Genuine curiosity, and perhaps a flicker of concern, motivated her. Silence stretched, heavy and thick. "An accident," he finally mumbled, his gaze fixed on the earth. "When I was a pup." Bryn sensed the veiled truth, but refrained from pressing. She finished bandaging the wound, her touch feather-light. When she was finished, she stepped back, granting him space. He rose, squaring his shoulders, the alpha back in command. "Thank you," he stated, his voice formal. "You're welcome," she replied, mirroring his formality. He turned to depart, then paused, glancing back. "Bryn," he said, his voice a shade softer. "What you did out there was astute. You perceived something I missed." A spark of warmth kindled within her. "I merely used my head," she demurred, attempting to minimize her contribution. "Don't," he urged, his gaze intense. "Don't diminish your actions. You possess a gift, Bryn. Don't squander it." He pivoted and strode away, melting into the throng of pack members. Bryn watched him go, her heart drumming a frantic rhythm. He had acknowledged her, recognized her worth beyond her status as a captive. A minor triumph, but a triumph nonetheless. She stared at her hands, the instruments that had cleansed his wounds, the hands that had aided in the pack's salvation. Perhaps, just perhaps, she could weather this storm. Maybe she could even carve out a place for herself in this bizarre, perilous world. Yet, as she turned back toward the pack house, a chilling premonition slithered into her thoughts. If Jackson valued her strategic acumen, would he safeguard her? Or would he exploit her, like everyone else, for his own ends? The nascent hope withered, leaving a residue of bitter uncertainty. She was bound to him, irrevocably so, yet she couldn't discern whether their bond offered sanctuary or merely another form of confinement. Doubt's revelation Bryn slipped through the timbered edges of packland, the air heavy with the must of damp soil and decaying leaves. Jackson's convalescence had drawn the pack's attention inward, masking her surreptitious mission. Her destination, Ilara, a reclusive healer spoken of only in whispers, shunned for her unorthodox practices and alleged knowledge of arcane remedies. Bryn hoped this outcast held the key to the Alpha's heir's demise, a revelation that could unravel the web of deceit that had ensnared her. The healer's abode was a modest, moss-laden cabin tucked away in the ancient wood, a place where sunlight struggled to pierce the thick canopy. A slender plume of smoke snaked from the chimney, carrying the pungent, earthy tang of unfamiliar flora. Bryn paused before rapping on the door, the weight of her accusation a heavy burden. This was a risk, a desperate appeal for a truth perhaps long interred. Ilara was a crone shaped by the wisdom of the wild, her face a tapestry of wrinkles, her gaze reflecting the tranquil profundity of a still pool. Her scrutiny was unnerving, piercing Bryn's carefully constructed facade. "You seek knowledge, cub," Ilara croaked, her voice like the rustle of sere foliage. "Knowledge with a steep price." Bryn met her gaze, unwavering. "I will pay it. I stand accused of poisoning the Alpha's son. I am innocent." Ilara pivoted, stirring a simmering cauldron of thick, inky fluid. The air became saturated with an acrid, almost offensive odor. The Alpha's son, a tragic loss. A wound that festers at the heart of our community. She paused, her voice barely audible. "They proclaimed it poison. A swift, agonizing end. But was it?" Bryn pressed, her heart hammering against her ribs. I need the truth to prove I had no part in this. Ilara turned back, her eyes gleaming with an unreadable light. Truth is a mutable thing. It shifts and distorts to suit those in power. But sometimes, she continued, plucking a charred root from the pot, sometimes the truth lies dormant, waiting for rediscovery. She placed Tav, the root, on a crude table. I examined the boy, unofficially of course. I was requested to offer a palliative, a placebo, if you will, to soothe the alpha's anguish. Bryn leaned forward, breathless. And what did you discern? Ilara's gaze intensified. It wasn't poison, not of the kind they allege. He succumbed to Lycos rot, a rare affliction. It assaults the internal organs, simulating the symptoms of specific toxins. In its final stage, it precipitates paralysis and organ failure. Agonizing, yes, but not induced. Ah. The words struck Bryn like a physical blow. Lycos rot. She recalled whispers of its existence. A malady so uncommon that few healers encountered it outside the oldest volumes. It was virtually undetectable, easily mistaken for some other cause. And someone had exploited that. Why the fabrication? Bryn murmured, the puzzle pieces beginning to align. Power, Ilara stated simply, her voice flat. Control, fear, possibly a scapegoat to bind the pack together in sorrow and rage. She regarded Bryn, her eyes reflecting a knowing melancholy. You were chosen, cub, a sacrifice to assuage their pain. A surge of raw anger coursed through Bryn. She had been exploited, framed, her life stolen. But beneath the anger, a spark of hope ignited. She knew the truth now, and she would wield it. Thank you, she said, her voice firm once more. You have given me what I require. Ilara nodded, following Bryn's departure with her gaze. The road ahead will be perilous, she cautioned. The truth is a dangerous weapon. Wield it with care. Emerging from the forest's gloom, Bryn felt renewed purpose. The weight of the false charge had eased, replaced by an implacable resolve. She wasn't just battling for survival. She was fighting for justice, for the buried truth. She would expose the architects of her plight, even if it meant challenging the Alpha himself. Back at the pack house, the atmosphere remained somber, the air thick with unspoken grief and resentment. Jackson was sequestered in his study, the door cracked open. She could see him hunched over scrolls, his face drawn with weariness. She paused, her hand hovering near the door. Part of her yearned to confide in him, to expose the venomous falsehoods. But another part hesitated, wary of his response, uncertain of his true allegiance. She recalled the vulnerability glimpsed in his eyes, the muted anguish beneath his stoic mask. Was he truly a callous leader, willing to sacrifice anyone to secure his dominion? Or was he a pawn himself, manipulated by others? She straightened her shoulders, making a decision. No direct confrontation, not yet. She needed irrefutable proof to shatter their lies. She would enlist allies, those who still believed in her integrity, those willing to risk everything for the truth. Then she would unveil the dark secrets festering within their midst. She moved silently away from the study. The path ahead bristled with danger, but she felt no dread. Truth was her weapon, and she would fight to her last breath for justice. She focused on unearthing enough evidence to sway the pack of her innocence, and that Lycos rot took the previous Alpha's son. Discovering medical records, corroborating witness statements, something to validate Ilara's story, was paramount. The task would be anything but simple. The conspirators undoubtedly possessed power and resources. Caution, methodical planning, and discretion were vital. She knew Jackson's eyes were on her, assessing, scrutinizing her motives. She couldn't afford mistakes or premature exposure. She would assume the expected role of a dutiful mate, while secretly collecting the proof needed to clear her name. A dangerous game it would be, a dance on a knife's edge, but she was ready to play. The stakes were impossibly high, but the prize, her freedom, her life, her honor, was worth the battle. The seeds of conspiracy, the ice of the flagstones invaded Bryn's bare feet as she stole from the Alpha's bedchamber. The moon bathed the hallways in a stark spectral light, twisting familiar architecture into a labyrinth of shadows. Jackson slept like the dead, a habit she'd previously appreciated for its quiet solitude. It offered her stolen moments, a chance to pursue the truth. Tonight's venture wasn't for fresh air or peace. She hunted. Ilara's warning clawed at her memory. Lycos rot, a malady so obscure, so ruinous, that it could easily pass for intentional poisoning. And how very convenient. So damned convenient for someone who wanted young Liam gone. She needed answers. She needed to clear her name, not just for the pack, but for herself. The unjust accusation hung over her like a suffocating shroud. Bryn's destination, the pack archives, a neglected repository stashed away in the oldest wing of the stronghold. Most shunned it, a realm of moldering scrolls and forgotten sagas, ideal for secret investigation. The lock, a simple tumbler, yielded to her hairpin in seconds, a skill sharpened during a youth spent in the seedier districts of her old pack. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with the musty breath of ancient parchment and decay. Bookshelves, like endless rows of silent sentinels, receded into the gloom. Striking a flint, Bryn watched a single candle cast macabre shapes across the walls. Where to begin? Liam's sickness, naturally. She had to unearth similar cases, any whisper of Lycos rot within the pack's annals. Hours dissolved. Fingers, stiff with the creeping cold, danced across endless spines. She devoured medical texts, private diaries, even antique bestiaries, seeking that single elusive thread. Frustration mounted. The sheer volume of information threatened to drown her, a deliberate maze designed to bury the truth. Just as despair began to set in, a slim, unassuming ledger, tucked low on a bottom shelf, caught her eye. Its pages were frail and yellowed, the ink faded with the passage of time. It chronicled the pack's fiscal history, dating back decades. The entries were mostly routine tithes collected, goods purchased, salaries disbursed. Then, a name leaped out. Silas Thorne. Silas Thorne. Jackson's right hand. A man who always seemed to slink through the periphery, his gaze sharp and calculating. A chill traced Bryn's spine. What was his name doing in such an old record? The note was brief, yet chilling. Disbursement Research Initiative Lycos strain. Lycos strain? Dread coiled tight in Bryn's stomach. She skimmed through the ledger, unearthing similar notations scattered across the years, each linked to Silas Thorne, and always phrased as some variation of Lycos research. What was he investigating? And to what end? She compared the dates to the pack's medical logs. A pattern began to form. Every so often, a mild wave of a similar, though less lethal illness, rippled through the pack. Always contained, always dismissed as common sickness. But viewed now, through the lens of Lycos rot, Bryn saw a horrifying connection. Silas wasn't just researching the disease. He was toying with it, the pieces slotted into place with sickening precision. Silas possessed motive, method, and opportunity to poison Liam. The question was why. Power, of course. With Liam dead, Jackson had no direct heir. Silas, as second in command, would be next in line. Bryn's mind whirled. She had to alert Jackson. But could she trust him? He'd been so quick to condemn her, so eager to believe the worst. What if Silas had already poisoned Jackson's perception of her? What if Jackson was complicit? The thought sent a tremor through her. Snapping the ledger shut, her hands shook uncontrollably. She couldn't approach Jackson empty-handed. She required proof, unassailable evidence that Silas was culpable. But how? Silas was shrewd, meticulous. He wouldn't leave a paper trail. Bryn surveyed the archives, her gaze sweeping the shelves. There had to be something, some lingering secret that could expose Silas's deceit. Her eyes snagged on a small, locked cabinet tucked into a shadowy corner. It was crafted from dark, burnished wood, its surface adorned with complex, ancient carvings. She tested the lock. Too intricate for a simple hairpin. She needed something more substantial. Her eyes darted around frantically, settling on a hefty iron fire poker propped against the wall. Used for tending the hearth in the great hall, but it would suffice. Fueled by a surge of adrenaline, she brought the poker down on the cabinet's lock. The wood cracked, the lock giving way with a satisfying snap. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, sat a small, ornamented box. Bryn lifted it, her heart pounding against her ribs. She opened it. Inside, she found an array of vials, each filled with a differently hued liquid. Some were crystalline, others opaque, some shimmered with an unearthly glow. Bryn didn't need a healer's training to know what they were. Poisons. And amidst them, in its own partitioned space, was a vial labeled Lycos Variant Sample A. Evidence, undeniable proof of Silas's treachery. Bryn clutched the box tightly, drawing ragged breaths. She had it. She could salvage her reputation. She could expose Silas as the monster he was. But as she turned to flee, a sound pierced the silence, a faint groan from the doorway. She froze, every nerve on high alert. Someone was there. Someone had been tracking her. She snuffed out the candle, plunging the archives into absolute darkness. "Who's there?" she rasped, her voice barely a whisper. Silence reigned. Then, a voice. Cold, familiar, utterly devoid of humanity. "Bryn, I suspected I might find you here." Silas. A wave of icy fear washed over Bryn. She was cornered. He knew. He knew what she had discovered. "Silas?" she responded, struggling to keep her voice steady. "What brings you here?" "Oh, just a nocturnal stroll," he said, his tone deceptively conversational. "I couldn't sleep. Thought I'd check on the archives. Ensure everything was in its place. And everything is fine," Bryn insisted, her grip tightening on the box. "I was just leaving." "Were you?" Silas questioned, a sharp edge to his voice. "Or were you perhaps searching for something?" He stepped into the moonlight, his face half hidden in shadow. But Bryn could see the gleam of polished steel in his hand. A dagger. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said, retreating slowly. "Spare me the pretense, Bryn," Silas snapped, his voice hardening. "I know what you found, and I cannot permit you to reveal it." He lunged. Bryn screamed, the box slipping from her grasp. The vials shattered against the unforgiving stone, their contents staining the floor. A wave of chemical fumes filled the air, sharp and suffocating. She scrambled backward, desperate to escape his reach. Silas advanced, dagger raised. "A pity, really, really," he said, his eyes gleaming with venom. "You possessed potential, but you've become a hindrance." He swung the dagger. Bryn ducked, the blade slicing through the air beside her ear. Seizing a weighty tome from a nearby shelf, she hurled it at Silas. It connected with his chest, sending him stumbling back. She didn't hesitate. She whirled and bolted, diving into the inky depths of the archives. Silas was right on her heels, his footsteps echoing through the still, silent chambers. She had to escape. She had to warn Jackson, if it wasn't already too late. A trusted ally, thorns clawed at Bryn's tunic as she plunged through the undergrowth. The sharp, clean scent of pine battled, failed, against the acrid, coppery stench of her own blood. Silas had moved with unexpected speed, his fury a palpable force that nearly overwhelmed her. She needed aid, someone unshakable. Lyra, calm, fiercely devoted, and observant. She possessed the qualities Bryn both admired and desperately required in an ally. Locating her would be a challenge. Returning to her assigned quarters, or other pack gathering spots, after the archives, was unthinkable. Yet, Bryn recalled Lyra frequently patrolled the eastern boundary, a duty she embraced, her commitment unwavering. The moon, a mere shaving in the sky, offered scant light as Bryn gained the territory's edge. There, silhouetted against the horizon on a craggy prominence, sat Lyra in her wolf guise. Relief, sharp as a blade, accompanied the jarring shift to her own four-footed form. She approached with caution, careful not to alarm her friend. Lyra pivoted, a low rumble vibrating in her chest before recognition dawned in her golden eyes. Quickly, she shifted back, retrieving discarded clothes from the nearby brush. "Bryn? What are you doing out here? It's far too dangerous." Worry laced her words. Bryn hesitated, gauging how much to confide. I need your help, Lyra. I don't know where else to turn." Lyra's brow creased. "What else happened?" Bryn inhaled sharply, then unspooled the tale. Her discovery in the archives, Silas's sinister experiments with Lycos rot, and his subsequent attempt to silence her permanently. She scrutinized Lyra's face, searching for any flicker of doubt or betrayal. Lyra absorbed every word, her expression tightening with each revelation. When Bryn finished, a heavy silence descended, broken only by the whisper of wind through the leaves. "Silas?" Lyra finally breathed, her voice barely audible. "But he's always been so devoted to Jackson, to the pack's well-being." "I know," Bryn replied, her voice strained. "That's why I initially dismissed it. But I saw the records, Myra. Dates, quantities, the evidence is irrefutable." "And you believe he orchestrated Liam's poisoning, framing you in the process?" Bryn affirmed with a nod. "He must be responsible. Liam was close to unraveling something about Silas. He silenced us both to protect himself." Lyra's gaze drifted, as if mentally assembling a fractured mosaic. "If this holds true, the entire pack faces catastrophe." "Precisely. That's why I need your help. We have to prove it, expose Silas before he can inflict further harm." Lyra regarded Bryn intently, truly seeing with desperation etched in her features, the unwavering conviction ringing in her tone. The Bryn she knew was incapable of the vile act she stood accused of. An upwelling of protectiveness surged through her, a profound loyalty eclipsing any lingering hesitation. "What do you need me to do?" Lyra asked, her tone resolute. A wave of relief washed over Bryn, so intense it nearly buckled her knees. I need unassailable proof, something to sway Jackson, irrefutable evidence that Silas cannot deny. Access to his personal chambers, his private ledgers, anything to substantiate what I witnessed in the archives. Lyra's countenance blanched. That's incredibly risky, Bryn. Capture guarantees dire consequences. I know, Bryn interjected, but it's the only route. Silas won't hesitate to eliminate any obstacles. We must neutralize him. Lyra drew another deep breath, fortifying herself. Fine. I'll do it. Silas trusts me. He frequently assigns me to deliver messages and documents to his quarters. I can exploit that familiarity. Thank you, Lyra. Words fail to express my gratitude. Just keep me appraised, Lyra responded, a fleeting smile touching her lips. And make every effort to survive. They devoted the next hour to crafting a meticulous plan, detailing each stage of their clandestine operation. Lyra would leverage her perceived trustworthiness to gain entry to Silas's chambers under the pretense of delivering urgent correspondence from a neighboring pack. Bryn would remain concealed, ready to infiltrate once Lyra instigated a diversion. The design was perilous, fraught with hazards, yet it constituted their sole hope. As the first blush of dawn painted the sky, they separated, each moving in a ball. Different direction, burdened by the weight of their secret pact and the dangerous mission ahead. The subsequent evening, Bryn found herself concealed within the thick vegetation encircling Silas's private residence, the atmosphere heavy with anticipation and dread. She observed Lyra approach the entrance, her bearing self-assured, her expression masking the turmoil within. Lyra exchanged a few words with the guard stationed outside, her words indistinct but her manner convincing. The guard nodded, granting her passage. Bryn held her breath as Lyra vanished within. Minutes dilated into an eternity. Her muscles screamed from stillness, her senses amplified. Each rustle of foliage, each snap of a twig, sent a jolt of adrenaline coursing through her. Finally, a window on the second story emitted a soft groan as it opened. Bryn glimpsed Lyra's face, pale and strained, illuminated by the muted light within. She subtly gestured, signaling Bryn to approach. Bryn stole forward, her movements seamless and silent. She scaled the wall with practiced agility, reaching the aperture and slipping inside. The room was dimly illuminated, furnished with imposing pieces and somber portraits. Silas's scent saturated the air, a blend of cedarwood and something else, something darker, bordering on decay. Lyra awaited her, her eyes wide with trepidation. "I uncovered something," she whispered, her voice trembling. "In his desk." She guided Bryn towards a large, ornate desk, its surface overrun with papers and documents. Lyra indicated a small, leather-bound journal concealed beneath a stack of parchments. Bryn opened the journal, her pulse hammering against her ribs. The pages were filled with Silas's script, detailing his experiments with Lycos rot, his escalating obsession with harnessing its power, and his sinister designs to deploy it against his adversaries. As Bryn skimmed the entries, a wave of revulsion surged through her. The callousness evident in Silas's pronouncements, the frigid calculation underscoring his schemes, was deeply unsettling. This transcended mere ambition. It revolved around dominion, the infliction of torment and anguish. Abruptly, a floorboard groaned outside the door. Bryn and Lyra froze, their gazes meeting in silent alarm. "He's coming," Lyra breathed, her voice a mere thread. "We have to flee." Bryn swiftly tucked the journal into her tunic, her fingers clumsy with haste. They navigated silently towards the window, retracing their path. As Bryn reached the sill, she glanced back at Lyra, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. But in that instant, something previously unnoticed registered. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor in Lyra's hand. Bryn hesitated, a knot tightening in her gut. Something was amiss. "Lyra," she murmured, her tone low and urgent. "Are you sure you're all right?" Lyra forced a smile, but her eyes betrayed her disquiet. "I'm fine," she insisted, her voice strained. "Just go. Escape this place." Yet, Bryn couldn't quell the suspicion prickling at the back of her mind. She scrutinized Lyra once more, her gaze probing, questioning. And then she spotted it. A minuscule, barely visible puncture mark on Lyra's wrist, partially obscured by her sleeve. Bryn's blood congealed. "Lyra," she whispered, her voice laced with dread. "What did he do to you?" Before Lyra could respond, the door was thrust open, and Silas stood framed in the entrance, his eyes burning with unrestrained fury. "Traitor!" he bellowed, his voice cracking with rage. "I always suspected you, Bryn, but I never imagined you would corrupt Lyra as well." Bryn stared at Silas, her thoughts racing. He knew they were acting in concert. But how? Then she understood. The message Lyra had conveyed, the urgent pretext for her presence in his chambers, it had been a carefully laid trap. Silas had harbored doubts about Lyra's allegiance, and he had manipulated Bryn into confirming them. He had used Lyra as a pawn. Lyra remained rooted to the spot, her face ashen with terror. "Silas, please," she stammered. "I can explain." "Explain what, Lyra?" Silas sneered. "Explain how you betrayed your pack, your alpha, your supposed friend? No excuse avails you, only retribution." He lunged towards Lyra, his hand raised to strike. Bryn reacted instinctively, interposing herself between Lyra and Silas's assault. Silas's fist collided. Ronan's web Bryn staggered, Lyra's hold on her arm the only thing preventing a collapse against the gnarled trunk of an ancient oak. Silas's blow, delivered from nowhere, had stolen her breath and ignited a searing pain in her side. Each inhale felt like a desperate gamble. "We have to move," she rasped, the words a painful scrape in her throat. Lyra, dirt smearing her ashen face, could only nod, mirroring Bryn's terror in her wide eyes. They slipped through the underbrush, embraced by the deepening gloom. Bryn cradled her ribs, battling the relentless throb. They needed sanctuary, someone trustworthy. But with whom? Did trust still reside? Jackson felt impossibly distant, a beacon swallowed by encroaching night. Lyra, surprisingly resolute, guided them, her footfalls sure despite her own evident fear. They skirted the pack's training grounds, the rhythmic thud of sparring wolves a brutal reminder of the acceptance Bryn had so briefly known. Now she was an outcast, a pariah. "Where are we going?" "Where are we?" Bryn whispered, her voice thin. "There's a cabin," Lyra replied, her gaze skittish. "My grandmother's. It's hidden, near the western border. The cabin was a refuge, modest and unassuming. Nestled amongst whispering pines, the air inside hung heavy with the ghosts of dust and forgotten herbs. Bryn slumped onto a wobbly chair, a wave of dizziness accompanying her relief. "We need to unravel Silas's scheme," she declared, her mind racing. "And why he involved you?" Lyra recoiled. I don't know." He framed it like he was helping the pack. "He claimed the Lycos rot was a real danger and needed me to help contain it." "And you bought it?" Bryn questioned, carefully neutral. Tears welled in Lyra's eyes. I wanted to. I desperately wanted to believe I could finally be useful. For once. Bryn exhaled, her ire dissipating. Lyra was as much a victim as she was. Silas had exploited her vulnerabilities, her yearning for purpose. It's all right, Bryn soothed, reaching for Lyra's hand. We'll solve this together. Sleep proved elusive as darkness deepened. Bryn roamed the cramped cabin, her thoughts a tangled mess of suspicion and anxiety. Something felt amiss. Silas, though lethal, was also vain. He wouldn't expose himself without absolute certainty of triumph. That implied accomplices, powerful ones. I can't settle, Bryn confessed, shattering the quiet. Lyra shifted. Neither can I. Let's step outside, Bryn proposed. Perhaps the air will offer clarity. They ventured out beneath the silvery wash of the moon, their silence punctuated only by rustling leaves. As they approached the wood's edge, hushed voices drifted to them, low, insistent murmurs. Stay put, Bryn breathed, melting into the shadows. The voices sharpened. Bryn recognized one instantly. It was Ronan, Jackson's advisor. The second voice, an unfamiliar rasp, was guttural and menacing. Peeking through the foliage, Bryn saw Ronan facing a towering figure shrouded in darkness, while the figure's face remained hidden. Bryn felt the palpable force emanating from him. The Alpha is growing increasingly wary, Ronan was saying, his voice taut with frustration. He trusts her. Imagine that. Human. The girl is a loose end, the figure rumbled. Remove her. Not yet, Ronan snapped. She still serves a purpose. Her presence sows discord within the pack. Jackson is distracted, torn between duty and his. Fascination. The pack is fragmenting. Bryn's blood turned to ice. Ronan was manipulating events. Not to protect, but to destroy. Once Jackson is out of the picture, Ronan went on, the pack will require a firm hand, someone who understands the true nature of our kind. And you see yourself in that role? The figure scoffed. I alone can restore order, Ronan declared, his voice saturated with arrogance. The Alpha line has grown weak. It's time for a change in leadership. Bryn's mind swam. Ronan was plotting a takeover. He was orchestrating chaos with Silas and the Lycos rot, and she was slated to be the patsy. Accusations of treason, poisoning the Alpha's son, driving a wedge between Jackson and his people, all pieces of his elaborate deception. Retreating soundlessly, her heart hammered against her ribs. She had to warn Jackson. But could she trust him now? He had accepted the lies, the accusations. He had imprisoned her, doubted her. And Ronan was his most trusted confidant. Lyra waited anxiously where she'd left her, her eyes reflecting fear. What did you overhear? Lyra asked, her voice trembling. Ronan, Bryn whispered, her voice raw. He's orchestrating everything. He's collaborating with Silas. He intends to seize power from Jackson. Lyra gasped. No, Ronan? He always seemed so dedicated. Loyalty is a mask he wears convincingly, Bryn said, bitterness coloring her tone. He's been using us all. I was a pawn in his scheme. They trudged back to the cabin, the weight of their revelation crushing them. Bryn knew they couldn't linger. Ronan would be hunting them. They had to uncover the proof that would expose his duplicity to Jackson. We need proof, Bryn said, pacing the confines of the room. Something concrete to convince Jackson that Ronan is the true threat. But what? Lyra asked, her voice laced with despair. Silas won't betray him. And Ronan, he's too careful. Bryn paused. a spark of hope kindling in her eyes. There is one person who might possess some knowledge. Someone with access to Ronan's secrets. Who? Lyra asked. His wife, Bryn stated, her voice resolute. Anya. Bryn nearly stumbled into Jackson's study. Lyra, a silent sentinel, at her back. Each pulse of agony from her bruised ribs hammered a frantic rhythm, propelled by a surge of adrenaline and the urgent need to get through to Jackson. He was silhouetted by the window, the waning sun etching the room in a tapestry of light and shadow, his expression a complex blend of concern and command. He pivoted as she entered, a frown creasing his brow as he assessed her disarray. Bryn, what happened? Are you injured? The genuine alarm in his voice, so unlike the icy skepticism she'd braced for, almost derailed her. She fought past the hesitation, fumbling in her borrowed jacket for the documents. I have proof, Jackson. Proof that Ronan is in league with Silas. His features hardened. What is this nonsense? Bryn thrust forward the painstakingly duplicated records, the ink faintly moist. These are from Lyra's grandmother's cabin. Ronan has been diverting intelligence, assets, everything Silas requires to destabilize your position. Jackson snatched the papers, his gaze devouring the contents with a speed that amplified the rigid set of his jaw. The silence that descended was broken only by the whisper of parchment and Bryn's ragged breaths. The stillness thickened into a palpable tension until Jackson finally raised his head, his face an impenetrable wall. These are fabrications. They have to be. They aren't, Bryn countered, her voice gaining a desperate edge. Lyra's grandmother witnessed them together. Ronan is betraying your trust, Jackson. He covets your authority. He dismissed her with a curt shake of his head, sending the documents spiraling to the floor. Ronan has been my advisor since childhood. His loyalty is beyond question. He's practically family. Loyalty can be a mask, Jackson, Lyra interjected, her tone measured but resolute. Sometimes the deepest wounds are inflicted by those closest to us. Jackson rounded on Lyra, his eyes blazing with sudden fire. This is not your affair, Lyra. This is pack business. He shifted his focus back to Bryn, his tone softening marginally, though the underlying steel remained. Bryn, you're distressed. You've endured hardship. You're drawing erroneous conclusions. Erroneous conclusions? Bryn echoed, her voice incredulous. Silas nearly ended my life, thanks to Ronan's intel. And you think I'm misinterpreting that? She advanced, her voice a taut wire stretched near breaking. Anya knows, Ronan's wife. She must suspect something. Speak with her, Jackson. Please. A muscle ticked in his jaw, a flash of something indecipherable flickering across his face. I will not involve Anya. She's suffered enough already. Enough? What about what I've suffered? What about Silas's machinations? Will you simply disregard this because you refuse to accept it? Her composure shattered, and Bryn's voice rose. Ronan framed me, Jackson. He orchestrated my downfall, making me the scapegoat for Silas's poison plot. And you defended him. You left me to languish in a cell while he enjoyed his freedom. Jackson's expression darkened, thunder gathering in his features. I spared your life, Bryn. Don't conveniently forget that. Spared me? Bryn's laugh was devoid of mirth, a brittle cutting sound. You claimed me. You bound me to you to avert a pack scandal. You didn't save me. You merely used me as leverage in your power plays. That's untrue, he insisted, his voice lacking conviction. He averted his gaze, unable to meet her accusing stare. Isn't it? Bryn pursued, closing the distance between them. invading his personal space. "Tell me, Jackson. Tell me you claimed me because you desired me, not because it served your purposes." He remained mute, his jaw clenched like a vise. His silence spoke volumes. Tears pricked at Bryn's eyes, blurring her vision. "I entertained the notion perhaps there was something authentic between us, something beyond mere obligation and responsibility." She swiped at her eyes, a gesture of defiance against the impending tears. "You speak of fealty, yet you remain blind to the treachery unfolding before you. You're so consumed by your own world, your own authority, that you're incapable of discerning reality." "Don't presume to grasp the weight of my burdens," Jackson snapped, his eyes blazing with fury. "You comprehend nothing of what it entails to govern this pack." "And you comprehend nothing of what's staring you right in the face," Bryn retorted, her voice trembling with a blend of anguish and anger. "You're so petrified of being wrong, of acknowledging your misjudgment, that you're prepared to jeopardize everything. You're a fool, Jackson." The accusation hung suspended in the air, laden with condemnation. Jackson's face twisted into a mask of unrestrained fury. "Get out," he growled, his voice a low, menacing rumble. "Get out of my sight." Bryn held his gaze, her heart aching with a depth of pain that eclipsed any physical injury. She had clung to the hope, however improbable, that he would believe her, that he would extend his trust. But her hopes were dashed. He had chosen Ronan. He had prioritized his misplaced allegiance over the truth. She pivoted and strode toward the exit, Lyra shadowing her movements. Reaching the doorway, she hesitated, glancing back at him one last time. "You're committing a grave error, Jackson," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "And when Silas triumphs, when your pack crumbles, remember who bears the responsibility." Then she departed, leaving Jackson alone amidst the lengthening shadows, his face a study in doubt and burgeoning regret. The aftertaste of betrayal permeated the air, a bitter residue that would prove difficult to expunge. Exposing the truth, Bryn clutched her side, each inhalation a jagged shard twisting between her ribs. Jackson's accusations echoed, a relentless litany of condemnation. Naive, deluded, used. The sting of betrayal eclipsed any physical torment. She stumbled through the shadowy territories, her destination the ancient meeting ground, the heart of pack law and lore. A perilous gamble, a last resort. Yet she was out of options. Justice demanded utterance, even if her voice trembled with pain and exhaustion. She found Elara in the humble cottage she shared with her mate, tending to her own injuries. Elara's eyes widened, registering Bryn's distress. "What happened?" she asked, offering a steadying arm. "Ronan," Bryn gasped, accepting the support. "He's allied with Silas. Jackson refuses to believe me." Elara's expression hardened, resolve etching her features. "What do you need?" "I must address the pack. They need to know the truth." Elara didn't hesitate. "I'll stand with you. But Bryn, tread carefully. If Jackson is deaf to your words then they must hear it directly," Bryn cut in, her voice gaining purchase. "I won't allow Ronan's deceit to metastasize, not when lives are at stake." Elara nodded, understanding dawning. She hoped Bryn cleanse her wounds, the quiet punctuated only by the splash of water and the rustle of cloth. With each ministration, Bryn fortified her will, suppressing the throbbing ache of hurt and outrage. She had to be unyielding, not for her own sake, but for the safety of the pack. The clearing shimmered under the moon's pearly glow as Bryn arrived, leaning on Elara for support. A smattering of early arrivals watched with concerned curiosity. Jackson was absent. A relief. he would only attempt to silence her. Taking a steadying breath, Bryn stepped forward. Ilara's touch a solid anchor. Silence descended, every gaze focused on her. The air thrummed with unspoken queries. "I know many perceive me as an outsider," she began, her voice ringing clear despite the tremor in her limbs. "Accused of crimes I didn't commit. Claimed by the Alpha under complex circumstances." She paused, letting her words resonate. "But I stand before you now, not as an interloper, but as one of you. One who has unearthed a truth that threatens to unravel us all." A nervous cough fractured the silence. Bryn pressed on. "I have irrefutable proof that Ronan, a trusted member among us, is collaborating with Silas Thorne." A collective intake of breath swept through the assembled wolves. Dismay and fury vied for dominance in their expressions. "Lies!" a voice thundered from the periphery of the throng. Ronan strode forward, a mask of injured innocence on his face. "This is a desperate gambit by a traitor to deflect suspicion." Bryn ignored him, her gaze sweeping across the faces before her. "I have seen the evidence with my own eyes. I have overheard their insidious schemes. Ronan has been siphoning off resources, feeding Silas vital intelligence, and systematically eroding the Alpha's authority from within." Ronan advanced, his eyes burning with venom. "She's manipulating you all. She's a charlatan and a viper." Bryn raised her hand, silencing his outburst. "I possess a detailed ledger documenting the resource diversions. I have witnessed clandestine meetings under the cloak of night. I have heard Ronan openly declare his allegiance to Silas. His disdain for Jackson, his fervent wish to see this pack brought to its knees." She gestured to Ilara, who unfurled a large sheet of parchment. A copy of the ledger, painstakingly recreated, revealing the illicit transactions between Ronan and Silas. Murmurs intensified, now laced with burgeoning doubt. "This is a forgery!" Ronan roared, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. "Bryn fabricated this document to smear my name." "Did I?" Bryn countered, her voice gaining strength. "Then explain the encrypted messages. Explain the dates and sums that align perfectly with Silas's documented activities. Explain your clandestine meeting with Silas's thugs just days ago." Ronan's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, but no sound emerged. He scanned the faces of his packmates, their faith faltering, their eyes reflecting dawning suspicion. A low growl rippled through the crowd. Doubts were solidifying into anger. "I realize this is a bitter pill to swallow," Bryn continued, her voice softening slightly. "Ronan has been a steadfast member of this pack for many years. But the evidence speaks for itself. He has abused our trust. He has jeopardized our very existence." She met Ronan's gaze, her expression a tapestry of pity and resolve. "Why, Ronan?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Why this treachery?" Ronan's composure shattered. His eyes darted about, betraying fear and simmering resentment. "Because Jackson is a weakling," he spat. "He's shackled by outdated traditions and maudlin sentimentality. Silas promises strength, a new order, a chance for this pack to truly flourish." A wave of outrage crashed over the assembled wolves. Accusations and threats exploded into the night air. Several lunged forward, claws extended, intent on immediate retribution. "Enough!" Bryn shouted, her voice slicing through the bedlam. "We will not descend into savagery. We will hold Ronan accountable for his actions, but we will do so with reason and justice." She turned to the crowd, her eyes blazing with unwavering conviction. I know I am asking you to place your faith in me, a relative stranger. But I swear to you, I have no hidden motives other than the protection of this pack. I have risked everything to bring this truth to light. Now, I implore you to act upon it." The crowd fell silent, their rage slowly yielding to a tentative resolve. They looked from Bryn to Ronan, their faces canvases of uncertainty. The decision lay with them. As she watched the pack wrestle with her disclosures, a fresh wave of anguish washed over her. This time, not physical. It was the stark recognition that she had irrevocably damaged her bond with Jackson. She had prioritized the welfare of the pack above his allegiance, truth over unquestioning loyalty, and she knew, with a bone-chilling certainty, that their relationship might never recover. Yet, she stood resolute, prepared to face the repercussions, fortified by the knowledge that she had acted according to her conscience, regardless of the personal cost. Alpha's choice a palpable stillness hung in the air, the quiet before a storm's first crash. Bryn, bracing herself against the packhouse's rough timber, felt the tremor before the sound, a low thrum of contained fury, a plea desperate to break free. Jackson was out in the training yard, attempting to mend the tattered remnants of their pack's faith, poisoned so skillfully by Ronan. Straightening, she ignored the hot stab in her flank, a souvenir from Ronan's blade. A shallow cut, yet a brutal reminder of her near failure. Failure to Jackson, to the pack, to excise the festering malignancy at its core. A savage roar erupted, followed by the sickening smack of fist meeting bone. Her heart leaped into her throat. She bolted toward the training grounds, senses heightened. What she saw solidified her worst fears. Ronan, eyes burning with feverish zeal, loomed over Jackson, a silver dagger gleaming darkly in his grasp. Jackson knelt, one hand pressed to his injury, his face a mask of agony and betrayal. The warriors, stunned, their wills still bed by Ronan's influence, remained immobile. Time worked, each heartbeat a drawn-out echo. Bryn knew, with cold certainty, that inaction meant Jackson's demise. She launched herself into motion, a primal scream escaping her lips. She collided with Ronan like a human projectile, disrupting his balance. The dagger spun away, hitting the dirt. "Bryn?" Jackson croaked, his voice ragged with pain. His gaze, usually so piercing, was clouded with confusion and a hesitant glimmer of relief. A relief that hardened swiftly into suspicion as his eyes locked onto hers. "Get behind me," she hissed, barely audible. She lowered her stance, interposing herself between Jackson and Ronan. Her body a living bulwark. Every muscle screamed its subjection. Her wound pulsed with fire, yet she held her ground. She met Ronan's glare unflinchingly. His face was a grotesque parody of its former self, the veneer of loyalty shattered, revealing the dark rot beneath. You ruined everything," Ronan spat, venom coating each word. "I should have finished you both." "Why, Ronan?" Jackson managed, his voice gaining strength. He hauled himself up, using a practice dummy as a crutch. "Why this betrayal? Why betray the pack?" Ronan's laugh was a harsh rasp that cut through the charged air. "Betray? I was saving you fools." Silas opened my eyes. "The old ways are obsolete. We require strength, dominion, a means to transcend. You were all too blind to see the impending darkness. Transcend? By corrupting children? By butchering the innocent?" Bryn's tone was glacial, devoid of warmth. She felt curiously distant, as if observing this scene from afar. Ronan's gaze flickered to Jackson, a desperate, pleading glimmer in their depths. He promised us power, Jackson Cha, a means to defend ourselves. You were too preoccupied with playing the righteous alpha to perceive the looming threats. Jackson's features hardened, the confusion dissolved, replaced by a steely resolve. Silas promised you power? Or something else, Ronan? A desire you kept hidden in the shadows? Ronan recoiled, his carefully erected defenses crumbling under Jackson's unwavering scrutiny. The unpalatable truth hung heavy, unspoken yet undeniable. Ronan had been seduced by ambition, by a lust for power he could never legitimately attain. You exploited me, Jackson said, his voice dangerously calm. You twisted my trust, our friendship, to serve your own depraved ends. He advanced on Ronan, his eyes blazing with righteous fury. Bryn tensed, poised to intervene should Ronan retaliate. But the fight seemed to have evaporated from Ronan, leaving only a hollow shell. I believed I was acting in the best interest of the pack, he mumbled, his voice barely audible. The best interest? Jackson's laugh was devoid of mirth. You nearly annihilated us all, Ronan. You almost murdered my son. He closed the distance between them, his presence radiating authority. You are no longer welcome here. You are banished from pack territory. Should I ever see your face again, I will terminate you without hesitation. Ronan's shoulders sagged in defeat. He glanced from Jackson to Bryn, a spark of malice in his eyes, before turning and melting into the encroaching shadows. Jackson turned to Bryn, his expression an enigma. The warriors, finally roused from their stupor, began to murmur, their eyes reflecting a blend of shock, bewilderment, and nascent understanding. Why, Bryn? Jackson asked, his voice softer now. Why that intervention? Why did you save me? Bryn met his gaze, her heart clenching with a mix of relief and apprehension. She had averted his death, exposed the traitor, yet uncertainty lingered. Had she truly earned his faith? Because you are the Alpha, she replied simply. And because I could not let him harm you. Jackson scrutinized her, his eyes probing, searching for her hidden motives. Bryn maintained his gaze, unflinching, concealing the fear that gnawed within, the fear that he would never truly trust her, that their connection was as fragile as gossamer, easily severed by doubt. He reached out, his hand hovering near her cheek, then paused, hesitant. The silence stretched, laden with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. You are wounded, he said finally, his voice a whisper. He gently touched the bandage on her side, his fingers brushing her skin. Bryn flinched, not from pain, but from the intensity of his scrutiny. It is insignificant, she said, her voice strained. Jackson's eyes narrowed. Ronan inflicted this, did he not? Bryn nodded, unable to speak. He cursed under his breath, a raw, guttural sound that vibrated through her. He swept her into his arms, ignoring her protests, and carried her toward the pack house. I should have heeded you, he said, his voice laced with remorse. I was blinded by my own prejudices, by Ronan's fabrications. Bryn rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. A minor triumph, a glimmer of hope piercing the darkness. Yet the battle raged on. Silas Thorne remained at large, manipulating events, and the pack was fractured, its unity shattered. As Jackson carried her inside, Bryn knew one thing. She would defend him, defend the pack, even at the cost of everything, even if it meant confronting a formidable adversary who would stop at nothing to achieve his perverse objectives. New dawn, the crash resounded, a brutal percussion of tooth and nail, sinew and bone. Bryn, ribs screaming, watched Jackson and Ronan devolve into a cyclone of animosity. Jackson's every strike pulsed with the sting of treachery, each block showcased untamed strength. Ronan, however, fought with the frantic energy of a trapped badger, Silas's poisonous words still ringing in his ears. "It doesn't have to end like this, Jackson," Ronan bellowed, spitting crimson. "Join forces. We'll dominate together, shedding the weak." Jackson's answering growl was pure lupine rage. "You misunderstand the essence of leadership. It's not conquest, but shielding the vulnerable." The subsequent hit proved final. Exploiting Ronan's forward surge, Jackson slammed him against the gnarled trunk of the ancient oak, a silent witness to countless alpha contests. Ronan slumped, eyes reflecting stark incredulity. Jackson loomed, chest heaving, the alpha's sigil burning brightly on his shoulder. "You are exiled, Ronan." Jackson's decree vibrated with command. "Vacate this territory and never darken our borders again. Defy me, and I will personally become your shadow, your hunter." Defeated and disgraced, Ronan gained his feet with difficulty, melting into the gloom of the dense undergrowth. The pack observed in hushed solemnity, the weight of his perfidy palpable. Exhaustion washed over Bryn, yet mingled with a profound sense of liberation. It was done. Ronan was banished. But the wounds of his betrayal, along with the awareness of Silas's insidious influence, would persist. Jackson pivoted toward her, his gaze a complex blend of gratitude and a deeper emotion that sent a tremor through her, despite the ache in her side. He approached, favoring one leg, disregarding the murmurs of concern rippling through the pack. "Bryn," he murmured, his voice thick with feeling. "You saved me again." "You would have done the same," she countered, meeting his intense stare. He framed her face, his touch surprisingly tender. "But it transcends mere reciprocity, doesn't it? You sensed Silas's machinations. You saw through Ronan's deception. You perceived the truth obscured by my misplaced faith." He paused, inhaling deeply. "The pack requires a potent leader, Bryn, but it also necessitates someone with sharper perception, someone unafraid to question, to guide, someone I can entrust with my life and my heart." He knelt before her, ignoring the collective gasp. He captured her hand, his eyes searching hers. "Bryn, I acknowledge this began as a claim, a means of safeguarding you, yet it has morphed into something profound. I cherish you. Will you be my mate, my true mate? Will you stand beside me and usher this pack toward a brighter future?" The clearing fell silent, every breath held captive. Bryn's pulse hammered. She had never envisioned this, never dared to entertain a future where she was embraced, cherished, by the Alpha himself. Tears welled. "Yes, Jackson," she whispered. The word a fragile offering. "Yes, I will." A wave of relief surged through the pack's ranks. Jackson rose, drawing her into his embrace. He kissed her, a sealing kiss, a pledge of a future steeped in love, allegiance, and shared purpose. Later, as the pack celebrated the ordeal's conclusion, Jackson ascended the Alpha's rock, Bryn at his side. He raised a hand, silencing the revelry. "Tonight, we celebrate not merely the downfall of a traitor, but the genesis of a new era," he proclaimed. "An era of cohesion, of fortitude, and of equity. Bryn is my mate. She will be my co-leader. Trust her, respect her, and know she will always champion righteousness." He paused, then turned to Bryn, his tone soft with affection. "And to my mate," I pledge to heed your wisdom, to honor your judgment, and to love you fiercely until my final breath." The pack erupted in joyous clamor, their voices echoing through the timber. Bryn smiled, her heart overflowing. She knew the path ahead would be arduous. Silas Thorne remained at large, and the pack remained fragmented. But with Jackson at her side, bolstered by the unyielding loyalty of the pack's true hearts, she would confront whatever trials awaited. Even amidst the grand celebration, a quieter happiness unfurled. Torrin, as dependable as ever, approached Ilara, his eyes mirroring the same devotion that Jackson felt for Bryn. He lowered to one knee, offering a simple blossom woven into a rustic ring. "Ilara," he confessed, his voice thick with emotion, "you have always been our pack's heart, its voice of reason, the embodiment of compassion. I've loved you for an eternity. Will you grant me the honor of being my mate?" Ilara, her eyes reflecting the light of tears, reached out and took his hand. "Yes, Torrin," she responded softly. "Yes, I will." The pack rejoiced again, their joy compounded by the burgeoning romance between two of their own. Jackson and Bryn exchanged knowing smiles. They both understood Ilara and Torrin would serve as critical allies in the times ahead. Years drifted by. Jackson and Bryn guided the pack with shrewdness and power, their love acting as a guiding North Star. They expended a tremendous amount of energy restoring ties fractured by Ronan's double-dealing and Silas's plotting, nurturing a renewed sense of community and faith across all members. Bryn's analytical mind and caring heart augmented Jackson's brute strength and devotion, creating a leadership style that was both inspiring and reliable. Ilara and Torrin, as expected, became essential pieces of their collective strength. Ilara's tender guidance and Torrin's steadfast support fostered a pack that was not only indomitable but caring and humane. Their love story became an oft-told tale, passed down as a testament to true connection. The pack blossomed under their shared leadership. They formed alliances with neighboring collectives, developed trade routes, and shared valuable resources. They invented new defensive maneuvers, successfully protecting their land from outsiders. They prioritized the future of their pack by investing heavily in educational programs for the young and care for the elders. Perhaps most notably, they fostered a community where every member felt appreciated, honored, and loved. A pack where all differences were celebrated openly, and every wolf was given the chance to thrive. One evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, coating the sky in vibrant colors, Jackson and Bryn stood side by side on the Alpha's rock, watching their pack carry out their daily rituals. Children were at play, adults laughed, and elders shared stories of times long past. "We actually did it, Jackson," Bryn said, resting against him. "We've created a new dawn." Jackson wrapped an arm around her, pulling her in closer. "We did it together, Bryn," he answered. "And this is only a start." He kissed her, a kiss imbued with love, gratitude, and a deep sense of accomplishment. They'd weathered betrayal, adversity, and danger, but had emerged more powerfully united and more deeply in love than ever before. As they stood, observing their pack thrive, they were both aware their shared journey was far from complete. They felt more than ready, together, to encounter whatever challenges lay ahead as Alpha and Luna of the pack reborn. Their love acted as the very cornerstone of their strength, their unflinching belief the beacon of light that would lead them out of darkness and into a peaceful, prosperous future. Theirs was a love story permanently etched into the heart of the pack, a narrative whispered for generations to come, a legacy to the enduring power of love, loyalty, and courage to usher in a new dawn.